Hey guys, while I'm gone, I wanted to take an opportunity to hit on a couple of key points from a few of the chapters that we still have remaining. This is chapter 13, IT Alignment and Strategic Planning. Just a couple of key points here. If you remember, I've said in class, you write a strategic plan in IT, which is typically, 3 years and out, and they typically go out of date. There's going to be a fundamental shift that we didn't anticipate. Again, just assume that when you write that strategic plan, we should be able to take it all the way down to the level of doctors want new iPads. How does this connect to the overall vision of the organization? Okay, so just connecting the dots, if you will. And then from that, of course, again, this is business strategy kind of 101. From our strategic plan then becomes our tactical plan. How does it fit into our timetables, our budgeting? And budget, quite frankly, is one of the hardest things in IT. Again, when we think about that cost curve, probably the most common issue that I see with strategic planning, once we get into those tactical levels and then into budgeting specifically, the big issue is storage budget. As I've said many times in class, storage keeps getting cheaper, true statement. However, our need for storage continues to rise at rates that we can't anticipate. And this is incredibly important in our EHR world. The EHR itself doesn't really take up that much storage space, but what does is scanned images, so like our radiology images, our pathology images, and then when we have stuff like records from other entities coming in, from specialists, those sort of things that get scanned as high-resolution PDFs, that consumes over 70% of our storage. So we oftentimes miss that kind of guess, if you will. Okay. So again, just how do we put that strategy together? And again, strategy in the IT space is no different from business strategy. It has its own quirks, just like everything else, but the fundamentals you see on the screen here are probably no different than any other content you've viewed on strategy. So how do we get there? Again, like any other strategy, it better come from the overall organization, top-level strategy, and it better get to those core principles. We have to be somewhat diligent about new technology, right? When we talked about this in other classes around the Gartner hype cycle and that sort of thing, trying to anticipate what is, just high expectations versus what's really reality here. Okay. So here's a great example. How should IT support disease management? Okay. And these are just a few of the things that we can do. So again, look at IT as a supporting mechanism, not one of those things sitting in its own silo. And this is a fundamental shift. We didn't do a very good job of this 10 years ago. So, we're starting to bring IT to the table to some of these discussions and really drill down into how does IT function as a supporting mechanism, not alone out on their island. Again, here's some models that you can use. This one comes from the text. Specifically, they're looking at mobile devices. This is one of many ways you can do it. I've seen hybrid models of this. There's not specifically a right or wrong here. Again, you can drill into this if you want, but you'll see this a lot at strategic goal setting. So again, this is a good example of at the top, right? This very somewhat kind of vague goal. And I always think of this as, if I read this to a neutral third party or a patient, would they understand this? And in this case, it kind of passes the litmus test, right? Improve service to outpatients. Okay, anyone can get that. So then we drill down, what are the problems? And here's where we've really turned a corner in the last decade is then we put IT to this and say, how do we leverage technology to support that goal? And we can clearly connect the dots here, right? If we look down here, a call center for one-stop access to all outpatient services. And we can use technology to help that happen. Master schedules for common service groups, same thing. So real easy to see how that ties back to our goal, if you will. I hate this diagram, but it does somewhat make a point. How do we pull it all together, and how we go about this is kind of interesting. In the past years, people have gotten really big about, well, let's do an offsite retreat. Let's talk about the strategy. Frankly, I used to find these things incredibly painful, but I guess it's a necessary evil. So again, talking about that IT asset kind of belabors the point here, but you get it. Where does the application come from? How do we keep it uniform? How do we acquire it? And then what does that infrastructure look like? And as we've talked in class in recent years, there's been more and more emphasis on who owns that infrastructure. Do we keep it in-house or do we go with that third party? And we've talked about those pros and cons of that. Data, how do we get our data in a usable format? We talked in other classes as well about the upsurge of unstructured data and how it's not as useful to us. And then, of course, our IT staff, we've had plenty of discussions of that as well. Is, how do we keep them trained up, knowing that, healthcare might not be the place where we can pay the best money to a Linux administrator or a Citrix person. So we've got to get resourceful on how we keep good staff. Okay, so this is kind of just recapping, but you get the idea here. And again, another kind of diagram, if you will, of connecting the strategy back to IT, right? So what is our challenge? Okay, so for example, they have quality and safety. And then how does IT come in and support that? CPOE, online discharge summaries, med administration records. So again, you can make these connections pretty easily to how technology is now becoming a supporting mechanism of our strategic plan. Okay. Again, I've kind of talked through some of this. IT planning shouldn't be a separate project, okay, or process. It doesn't have a beginning or an end. It does have to be part of that shared decision making. And there usually are themes, right? So one big theme I'm seeing right now is a theme of usability, right? Make the system easier to use, okay? Don't necessarily need a bunch of new features right now. I just need it to be more user-friendly. So that kind of wraps it up. We talk about this overall strategic plan. So again, this is consistent with what you've probably seen in other business strategy courses. Just kind of has that IT flair to it. Again, if you take anything away from this, know that IT has to be that supporting function to our overall strategic plan.